Good evening. All right. Okay, opening joke. What do you call 50 grown men sitting around watching the Super Bowl? The correct answer is the Baltimore Ravens. Hey, a couple years ago, I read Atomic Habits. I think Brian mentioned it a little bit ago. And the key insight of that book was that it's your habits, your daily practices, and not your goals that determine your outcomes in life. And so, I've just been wrestling with this idea of habits and daily practices. And one of my favorite books, one of my favorite movies as a kid was Karate Kid. You remember that movie where Daniel LaRusso, he asks Mr. Miyagi to teach him karate, right? So Mr. Miyagi says, come over to my house. What does he teach him to do? Paint the fence, wax the car, and stain the deck. And he shows him these very specific motions. And after a couple weeks of doing all these chores, he's like, Mr. Miyagi, aren't you going to teach me karate? And Mr. Miyagi asks him to repeat those motions. Paint the fence, wax the car. And he says, show me paint the fence. Show me wax the car. Show me stain the deck. And as he repeats these muscle memory motions, he realizes that he's learned karate unaware as Mr. Miyagi starts throwing punches and kicks at him, and he's able to block all of his attacks with these movements. And so I remember I read another book a couple years ago about Pete Maravich. Do you know who that is? Pete Maravich was one of the greatest dribblers in the history of basketball. And his dad was a coach at LSU, and I just remember one of the stories of what his dad did to teach him how to play basketball. He would take him out to the train track, and he'd drive his car on the train track, and he would open the passenger door and make Pete dribble the ball on every slat on the train track. And that's why he became one of the greatest dribblers in the history of the sport. And so I'm just curious about what are these practices that transform us on a daily basis? And what are the habits that really change our lives? Beyond all the fluff, beyond all the quotes, beyond all the tweetable content or shareable content, when it gets down, when the rubber hits the road, what are the daily practices that actually change our life? And I think that if you read the Bible, these practices have been hidden the whole time. Now, I call these the hidden habits, but they're hidden not because nobody's ever done them. I mean, people have been doing these things for thousands of years. These are hidden habits of the Bible because we often forget how much impact these 8 habits that I'm going to talk about tonight, we often forget how much impact they have on our lives and our transformation. And so welcome to the hidden habits of the Bible. I have preached hundreds of sermons. I've been a preacher for 20 years. I've read probably 200 books on habits and goal setting and spiritual growth in my life. And I've found that the Bible is full of habits that are going to help you have a meaningful life. And so I'd like to share with you the 8 hidden habits of the Bible. And the best part about this is I guarantee you that you are going to remember all 8 of these habits when you walk out of the doors tonight. You're not going to forget a single one. And so afterwards, I've got something out in the lobby that I would love for you to see that we set up when everybody came in, and I'd love for you to take a picture of it and just keep that as a mental memory as you go out of here tonight. And so give me a few minutes of your time, and I'd love to share with you what I see to be the hidden habits of the Bible. And the first hidden habit of the Bible is called guard your Eden. Guard your Eden. Warren Buffett has a thought experiment that he does with people, and he says, I want you to imagine that your life is like a marble. And he says he goes to people and he says, would you be willing to take your marble, and if somebody brought you a huge jar filled with billions of marbles that represented all of the other people's lives in the world, would you be willing to take your marble and trade it for one of those marbles and live that person's life instead? And he says, if your answer is no, he says, my friend, you are living a blessed life. Now, speaking of a blessed life, how many of you remember the first time you ever went to Disneyland? You show up in the parking lot. There's the tram that takes you from the parking lot to the entrance. Maybe you remember the monorail, and you get up to the gates of Disneyland. There's the train that goes by, and you get checked in, and you walk down Main Street for the first time. I remember as a kid going in California with my grandparents, and there's cotton candy smell, there's popcorn. You get to the end, there's soda pop corner, there's the ragtime piano player playing on the corner there. You go to Pirates of the Caribbean ride, which later on in life you realize that that's where all the parents go to take a nap, is the Pirates of the Caribbean ride to get a break from Disneyland. Or maybe you remember the Swiss Family Robinson tree and the sights it's out. Now I think it's called the Tarzan tree. I don't remember. But by far, the moment of Disneyland that we all remember is what? When you first see the castle. The castle right there for the very first time. And that memory is so powerful for so many people, and Disney figured this out. That's why they put the castle at the beginning of every single Disney movie, because they know there's an emotional connection to that image and that moment, because for many of us, that represents the perfect place when you're a kid. At the beginning of the world, God made a perfect place for humanity. Genesis chapter 1 and 2 tells the story. This was called the Garden of Eden. It was a paradise. There was any kind of food that you could ever imagine to eat. There was anything you wanted to drink. It was pleasurable to the sight, to the senses. And God said you could eat, he told the first human beings, Adam and Eve, you could eat from any tree in the garden except from that tree over there, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And most of you know the story. Adam and Eve disobey God, and they eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And here's what it says in Genesis chapter 2. 3 verse 22, then the Lord God said, look, the human beings have become like us, knowing both good and evil. What if they reach out, take fruit from the tree of life and eat it? Then they will live forever. So the Lord God banished them from the Garden of Eden, and he sent Adam out to cultivate the ground from which he had been made. After sending them out, the Lord God stationed mighty cherubim to the east of the Garden of Eden, and he placed a flaming sword that flashed back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. It strikes me that we can get judgmental of Adam and Eve, but it strikes me that all of us, and we know this intuitively, all of us are one decision away from ruining our lives. And they ruined things so bad that there was a literal flaming sword guarding their way back into that perfect place. And that's why this hidden habit is called Eden. Because all of us are one decision away from ruining things that God has placed in our lives that are blessings. We're one choice away from ruining everything to the point where we can never go back to the way that it was before. I mean, imagine that we lived in a fictitious world where everybody had a magical device in their pockets that had the literal logo of an apple with a bite taken out of it, that with a push of the button, you could have an affair with your coworker. With the push of a button, you could send an emotional text to a boss and lose your job. With the push of a button, you could gamble away your life savings in sports betting. Oh, wait, that's not a fictitious world. That's the real world that we live in, right? You ever heard of Oriental Trading Company? If you've ever done any children's ministry stuff, VBS, if you've ever been a teacher in a school, you know what Oriental Trading Company is. It's a company that sells trinkets and toys and crafts and gadgets for kids activities. Well, the story of Oriental Trading Company, it was owned by a guy who gave it to his son, and his son's name was Terry Watanabe. Terry grew this company incredibly to the point where it was making so much profit, and Terry Watanabe got bored. And so he did what a lot of people do when they get bored, and he went to Vegas. And he got a suite at the Wynn Hotel, which is... It's a beautiful hotel if you've ever been to Vegas. And he gambled so much money that Steve Wynn kicked him out of the casino. I mean, which kind of blows my mind that Steve Wynn kicked somebody out of his casino for participating in the casino. And so he went across the street to Caesar's Palace, and he got a suite at the Caesar's Palace. And over the course of the next year, it's estimated that Terry Watanabe gambled away $278 million. He lost his dad's company. He lost everything that was important to him, and he will never get it back. So the question is, what is it that you need to guard? What is your Eden? What is that thing that God's put into your life that's a blessing that you don't want to mess this up? And all these other habits are going to be more proactive. Here's something you need to do. But what if the first habit is just stopping and saying, what are the things that God has put in my life that are important to me, that are blessings to me, that I need to guard. And the thing about guarding is 90% of the time you're doing nothing. You're just being vigilant. Guarding your Eden can be something super small. It can be like, if you value your family, it could look like putting your phones away at mealtime, where you say, hey, you know, my family is so important to me that we're going to put this practice in place to guard that time, because I know that in a few short years or a few short amount of time, my kids are going to be in college. This is precious time that we have. Guarding your Eden might look like tracking your budget every single day and documenting expenses, because there's simple decisions that we can make with our credit card that gets you so far in debt that it takes years to get out of debt. Guarding your Eden could look like showing up to work on time every day. Maybe your Eden is a workplace. It's a job that's a blessing to you that you don't want to squander. Maybe it's a family. Maybe it's a spouse. Whatever it is, those most important things in our life, the first hidden habit is perhaps just the ability to say no to things that put that in jeopardy. Saying no to sleeping with your phone. Saying no to responding to messages from past romantic interests. Saying no to drinking while buzzed. Saying no to staying up too late at night. Saying no to online gambling. And it's easy to get excited about changes in our lives, especially this time of year. We're thinking about the year and goal setting. But the first step, the first hidden habit, is to do nothing and simply stand guard over the important things that God's given you in your life. Guard your Eden. The second hidden habit is called Chase the Dawn. And a couple years ago, I don't know if you remember this, but the actor Mark Wahlberg, he posted his morning schedule. And it went viral. It was all over the news. And here's what his morning schedule looks like. At 2:30 a.m., he wakes up. At 3:15 a.m., he eats breakfast. At 3:40, he has his workout. 5:30, he has a post-workout meal. 6 a.m. shower. 7:30 golf. 8 a.m. snack. How do you play golf in 30 minutes? I don't know. 9:30 a.m. cryo recovery chamber. And that's Mark Wahlberg's morning. I remember when I saw that, I thought, there's no way that I'm ever going to get up at 2:30 in the morning. But I also thought, should I be scheduling my own snack times? And the answer is, of course, yes. If you are scheduling, but here's the crazy thing. The morning hours have so much stage time in the Bible. It's crazy. Lamentations 3:23 says, God's compassion is new every single morning. Psalm chapter 5, verse 3, in the morning, O Lord, you hear my voice. In the morning, I lay my requests before you. Psalms chapter 90, verse 14, satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love that we may sing for joy and be glad all of our days. Psalm chapter 88, verse 13, but I, O Lord, cry to you. In the morning, my prayer comes before you. All of the main characters in the Bible woke up early. Abraham got up to meet with God. Jacob got up to meet with God. Joshua, Hannah, David, Job, Moses. All the way down to Jesus, who woke up every single morning to get away for solitude and recharging. I love this passage in Exodus chapter 16. There's a great example here where Moses has led the Israelites out of Egypt and into the desert, into the wilderness, and they're starving. And God causes this substance to rain down in the middle of the night and dry on the floor of the desert. It's called manna. In the morning, they wake up and it's dried and it's crusted, and they actually can eat it for nourishment. It's this miraculous provision that God gave to them. And here's what it says in Exodus 16, verse 21. Each morning, everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. Even back in the Old Testament, if you wanted the blessings of God, if you wanted the food of God, you had to get up in the morning before the sun came out. You know, some of the challenges for getting up in the morning, I mean, some of us, we'd call ourselves by nature morning people, but I mean, think about the challenges of getting up in the morning. 200 years ago, people got up when the sun rose, and they went to bed when the sun set. But then they invented the light bulb, and of course, our days got longer. People started socializing into the evening, and we could kind of artificially manipulate the length of our days. And then the iPhone got invented. 90% of people sleep with their phones. And then 95% of people check their phones the first thing upon waking up. You know, we're just such a solitude-deprived culture. I remember Blaise Pascal, who's a Christian philosopher, he has this quote where he says that all of mankind's problems come from our inability to sit alone in a room. And I think that's true. Are you tired of hectic mornings? Are you tired of feeling stuck in your spiritual life? Are you tired? Do you feel like you need a breakthrough? Do you want to live like Jesus lived? Then you need to get up and chase the dawn. Mark chapter 1, verse 32, rising very early in the morning while it was still dark, Jesus departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him, and they found him and said to him, everyone is looking for you. Jesus had the habit of waking up early in the morning. Some of the greatest thinkers throughout history have woken up early in the morning. Several years ago, there was a book called The 5 a.m. Club that came out where they were advocating for recovering the 5 a.m. hour for reflection and meditation and exercise. Jocko Willink, who's an internet personality, former Navy SEAL, posts a picture of his watch every single morning, and it's usually around 4:30 a.m. Chase the dawn. There's something special about the morning hours. Morning activities, it's a metaphor for a fresh start. There's a ton of modern research and science behind the benefits of waking up in the morning, but the cool thing is that this was hidden in the Bible all along. And so how do you chase the dawn? What does that mean? Number one, it means keeping the morning watch. In the Bible, the watches of the night is what they call it. The nights were divided into 4 watches because the sun went down about 6 p.m. And then from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. was called the first watch. From 9 p.m. to 12 p.m. is called the second watch of the night. And then from 12 to 3 is the third watch. And from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. is the fourth watch of the night. And what's fascinating about this, if you study it in the Bible, is look at all the times the fourth watch of the night is mentioned. There's some incredible things that happen during the hours of 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. In fact, Christian tradition, they call this practice, getting up to meet with God and spend time in prayer and solitude, they call it keeping the fourth watch, keeping the morning watch. Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt through the Red Sea during the fourth watch of the night. Jesus walked on water to save his disciples from the storm during the fourth watch of the night. The angels appeared to the shepherds to announce the birth of Jesus during the fourth watch of the night, somewhere between the hours of 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. And so keep the fourth watch means to wake up sometime between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. You never know what blessings you're missing out on when you miss the fourth watch of the night. Number 2, say a one-sentence prayer when you get out of bed. Say, Lord, thank you so much for this day. Or, Lord, please bless this day. Number 3, establish a morning routine. The 5 a.m. Club has a routine that they call the 20-20-20 routine, where you spend 20 minutes of exercise, 20 minutes of reflection, and 20 minutes of reading or meditation. 20-20-20. Create your own routine. What do you like to do first thing in the morning? Make it a point to watch the sunrise every single day. The neuroscientist Andrew Huberman says the single best thing you can do for sleep, energy, mood, wakefulness, and metabolism is to get natural light in your eyes the first thing in the day. Drink a cup of coffee outside. Be still. Do your thinking. Write in a journal. Brainstorm. Take inventory of your emotions. You have to chase the dawn because all of us here only have a limited number of sunrises left in our lives. We have a limited number left. Don't miss the sunrise. You know, for a while, I take my daughter to school in the mornings down south, and every morning I was kind of complaining about it. I'm like, this is like a 20-minute round trip. There's all this traffic. And then I realized I realized I've seen some of the most beautiful sunrises while I'm taking my daughter to school. And I get to talk to her. And then I decided that every morning that I drop her off, I'm going to spend that 5 or 6 minutes that it takes to get back to my house. I'm going to pray for every person in my family. And so I get to watch the beautiful sunrise. I get to pray for every person in my family. You never know what hidden treasures are waiting for you if you make a decision to chase the dawn. So hidden habit number 3, recently when I was a kid, I used to think that there was shoes that you could buy that would make you run faster. and jump higher? The PF Flyers. But then you realize that there are no shoes that make you run faster. But wait. There actually are shoes that make you run faster. They are the Nike Vaporflies. So much so that they were banned recently from the New York City Marathon. The Kenyan runner Eliud Kipchoge ran a marathon under 2 hours for the first time in history. They realized the top fastest men's marathon times were all ran with Nike Vaporflies. And they did some research and they realized that these shoes, they actually make you run 4% faster than everybody else. And so they banned these shoes. In a culture that's constantly inventing new ways to go faster, our third hidden habit is to remove your running shoes. Luke chapter 10 tells us a story about several people that were in a hurry. It's the story of the Good Samaritan. Many of you have heard it. Man gets beat up on the side of the road, left for dead. He's needing help. He's crying out for help. A priest sees him, the guy you would expect to help, and he passes by on the other side. A Levite sees him, and he passes by on the other side. Because these guys were in too much of a hurry to help the guy that was in a ditch. And then the very next story, right after that, the very next verse, tells a story about Jesus going to the house of these two women. And let me read to you what it says here in Luke chapter 10. As Jesus and his disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught, but Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits there while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. But the Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset about all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about, and Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. The one thing that Mary chose was slowly sitting before Jesus, unhurriedly listening. I think it's often unappreciated how much Jesus walked everywhere. He walked estimated 21,500 miles in his life. That's almost all the way around the world at the equator. The average walking speed is 3 miles per hour. And so I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that 3 miles per hour is the speed of God. The Bible never says run with God. It only ever says walk with God. But we're so busy and we're so addicted to this hurried and frenetic lifestyle that a lot of times we need to slow down and keep pace with our 3 mile per hour God. In the early 1900s, it was all the craze. Everybody wanted to get to the South Pole. And so there was a true story of two expeditions that set out on a journey to the South Pole. They had two different strategies. The first expedition said, you know what? On the days where the weather's really good, we're going to march extra. We're going to go 30 miles, 40 miles, 50 miles. And then on the days where the weather's bad, we're just going to set up camp and rest and recharge. And then when the weather gets clear again, then we'll set out and march. And the second group decided to not march any extra when the weather was nice. And they decided to not rest when the weather was bad. But instead, they decided that they were going to march 20 miles every single day, no matter whether the weather was good or the weather was bad. Which of those groups do you think made it to the South Pole? Were they English or Norwegian?
Or in Denmark, was it? Yeah, no, I'm kidding. The second.
It's the second group. That's right. Somebody said the first group. You may think it's the first, but it's actually the second group. The group that marched 20 miles every single day, they made it to the South Pole and back. You know what happened to the first group? Everyone died. Slowing down literally saved the lives of the people in this second group. And, you know, it's the same in scuba diving. I have a friend who's a scuba diver, and he says that you can't come up quick. I didn't know this, but it's common sense if you think about it, but your body pressure, you have to let your body pressurize the deeper you get, and then if you swim up too quick, you'll die. Do you want to always be in a hurry in your life, rushing around to everything, or do you want to move slowly and be able to be present to people around you and be able to see people in need, like that guy in the ditch that was passed by on that on that road to between Jericho and Jerusalem. If you want to do that, then you need to remove your running shoes and walk with Jesus. And so removing your running shoes as a parent may mean just putting your phone away and engaging with your kids. Removing your running shoes as a boss might mean hiring slowly, taking your time with candidates for a position in order to really vet them and see who they are and see if they're a fit on the team. Removing your running shoes with a friend might mean putting your phone away whenever you're with them. Removing your running shoes as a married person may mean going on a walk with your wife or your husband once a day, just to slow down and talk and engage. Remove your running shoes when talking to your parents on the phone. Remove your running shoes when playing with your toddlers. When you're making a big purchase, slow down. When you're trying to choose a spouse, you're a single person, take off your running shoes. Slow down. When you're rushing through your daily Bible reading because it's a checklist, there's this annual reading thing that I have to get through, slow down and meditate on the truths that you're reading. Let yourself be interrupted by people. I heard somebody say that if Jesus had not without interruptions, he would not even have a ministry. All the amazing things Jesus did were because of people that interrupted him, and he was just ready to be interrupted. I love that. Get into the habit of going slow in a world that's constantly trying to go fast. One of my favorite places in the country is Monument Valley. Anybody ever been there? It's a desolate stretch of highway between Utah and Arizona, and it's one of the most beautiful sceneries you can imagine. There's these beautiful rock formations there, but the reason it's my favorite place is not just because it's beautiful, but because it's the place that Forrest Gump stopped running. Remember that? And there's all these people following him. He's run all the way across the United States of America multiple times. He's got a huge beard. There's this huge group of people following him, and he just stops, and all these people stop. And they're like, well, we gave up our lives to follow you. And he's like, I just didn't feel like running anymore. You know? Every day before you leave your house, remove your running shoes. And if you can get into a habit of slowing down, it will have an outsized impact on your life. Hidden habit number 4. When I was in 7th grade, I got in a fight with an 8th grader that was twice my size. And there was a little bit of buildup, but he said, I'm going to see you after school. And I wasn't one to back down from a bully, and so I said, I'll meet you there. So we showed up at the bus stop, and there was like 100 kids standing around watching. Everybody heard the news. And it wasn't much of a fight. Spoiler alert, he pummeled me. I was scrawny, 7th grader. I got in 2 punches. But I remember looking at all these kids there as I'm getting pummeled by this 8th grader and thinking, where are all my friends? And then my friend Jacob came running out of this pack of people, and he tackled this kid that was on top of me. And I remember walking away from that thinking, now that is a true friend. And our hidden habit number 4 is called find your furnace friends. My friend emerged from the crowd and saved me from this 8th grader. One of my favorite stories of friendships in the Bible is the story of these 4 guys named Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's the book of Daniel tells the story. These were guys who probably their whole family was killed. Probably a lot of people they knew were killed when Babylon took over Jerusalem. They took a bunch of slaves. And these were young men who were very smart and very strong that were taken as slaves into the palace of Babylon and forced by King Nebuchadnezzar to learn the customs in a country that was not their own. And these 4 guys stuck together. They took care of each other. They prayed for each other. And King Nebuchadnezzar wanted to put all the wise men of Babylon to death because nobody could interpret his dream. This is the kind of crazy king that he was. And so here's what happens in Daniel chapter 2, verse 17. When Daniel went into his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, those are their Hebrew names, his companions, and he told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. These are guys that prayed with Daniel. They entered into Daniel's fears. They struggled together. They were in a foreign country together. They had memories of home together. They had a shared struggle together. And I just have a question. Who is in it with you? Who's in it? Who are your people? When I was in Phoenix, I decided to move. And it is a joke, but it's true. If you want to know who your true friends are, move into a third-story apartment in Phoenix and move in the middle of July and see who shows up. Those are your true friends. But I remember I invited like 25 people to help me move, and then there was like 5 people that showed up. And I was thinking like, I wish I would have moved earlier so I could have like invested in these 5 people a lot more. Who's in it with you? Maybe you had a time in your life where you lost a job, maybe you moved, or maybe you got sick. Your furnace friends are the ones that showed up for you in that time of transition or that time of weakness. These are your furnace friends. These are not your Facebook friends. They're not your Instagram friends. Furnace friends are those who are in it with you. I love that meme that came out a couple years ago. It said that nobody really celebrates Jesus' greatest miracle, which is having 12 close friends in his 30s. Right? And so maybe you struggle with friendships in your life and you don't have many. Maybe you have too many friends and you're kind of more about quantity over quality. Maybe you do have these furnace friends that you care about and they're in it with you, but you don't really invest in them and you don't really talk to them a whole lot. And so how do we find furnace friends? And the first way to do this is counterintuitive. You don't go look for furnace friends. You have to get in the furnace. Your life has to be about something higher and greater than just finding friends. This is what C.S. Lewis says. He says, this is why those people that go try and find friends, they can never find any. Because friendship, the essence of friendship is not, do you love me? The essence of friendship is, are you pursuing the same thing as me? Do you see the same truth as me? Furnace friends are people that see the same truth as you, that are pursuing something higher. And the best place, I asked like 20 people where they found their furnace friends, their best friends, the people that are sticking with them. And guess what all of them said? One of them said, I went on a trip to Israel. Another one said, I joined a small group. Another one said, I went to this women's breakfast that was for moms of preschoolers. But the common denominator for the people I surveyed was they all found their closest friends at church. Because church is a place, it's like a furnace. It's a place where people go to live a better life and to be refined and to grow. They met their furnace friends at church. If you want to find furnace friends, you need to get in the furnace. And for some of you, that means willingly choosing to be a part of a community that's about something higher. The other way to do it is to be forced to do a furnace by life events, like whether you're in the military with people. That's how people become close friends. But we have a furnace that we can choose, which is the community of faith. You need to get in the furnace if you want to find those close friends. And you also need to be a furnace friend to people if you want to find furnace friends. How many times in the last week did you actually pray for your closest friends? How many times did you do it? You need to pray for them. You need to know what's going on in their life. If one of your friends asks you for help, you need to move heaven and earth to show up for them. Be someone that other people can depend on. Jordan Peterson was once asked, how do I know who my true friends are? And he said, your true friends are the people that when you tell them bad news, they listen. They don't interrupt and try to share a bad thing that happened to them and derail the entire conversation. They just listen. And when you tell them good news, they celebrate. I think that's pretty good. If you want to know who your friends are, if you tell them bad news, they listen. If you tell them good news, they want to figure out a way to celebrate with you. Those are your true friends. Be someone that other people can depend on. Identify your 3 key friends in life. Pay attention to them. Pay attention to their kids. Know when their kids' birthdays are. Have one day every week that you send a text or call that friend or make them a priority in your life. Who reciprocates your text? Who calls you back? Who shows up? Who celebrates your wins? Those are your people. Pray for them regularly. Know them deeply. Know their kids. The last time we see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is in Daniel chapter 3 when they disobey the king's edict that says you have to bow down and worship this statue that I set up. And they said, we're not going to do that. So King Nebuchadnezzar throws them into a fiery furnace. And here's what happens. Daniel 3:24. The king Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw in the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, your majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." What's cool to me about that is we don't know who that 4th person is. Maybe it was an angelic messenger, maybe it was God himself, whoever. But what we do know is that 4th person was a friend to these guys that were in the fire because he protected them from a flaming death. But it's also kind of profound to me to think about this. Sometimes you only discover your furnace friends after you're in the furnace. And so find your furnace friends. The next hidden habit is called break the jar. Hidden habit number 5, break the jar. When I was a kid, we used to go to the mall, and we had to walk through Dillard's to get to the other stores because of where we always parked at the mall in Manhattan, Kansas. But one of my favorite things to do was I would take some women's perfume samples from the countertop, and I would break them open, and throughout our trip to the mall, I would secretly wipe them on my brother. And by the time we got back to the car, he was so mad because he smelled like Liz Claiborne. It was great. Well, how would you feel if somebody put perfume on you? Mark chapter 14, verse 3. This is the hidden habit of breaking the jar. Jesus was in Bethany at the home of Simon, a man who previously had leprosy. When he was eating, a woman came in with a beautiful alabaster jar of expensive perfume made of essence of nard. She broke open the jar and poured the perfume over his head. Some of the people at the table were indignant. "Why would you waste such expensive perfume?" they asked. "It could have been sold for a year's wages and the money given to the poor." So they scolded her harshly, but Jesus replied, "Leave her alone. Why would you criticize her for doing such a good thing to me? You will always have the poor among you, and you can help them whenever you want, but you will not always have me. She has done what she could and has anointed my body for burial ahead of time. I tell you the truth, wherever good news is preached throughout the world, this woman's deed will be remembered and discussed." Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, went to the leading priests to arrange to betray Jesus to them. What an amazing story. This woman comes into a party and takes this incredibly expensive jar, and she breaks it and pours it on Jesus' head. This jar, they said, was worth a year's salary. And this woman is totally disregarding of the cost of this act of love. This woman recognized what was going to happen to Jesus because it says, this is what you would do to bodies for burial. And when all the disciples were waiting for Jesus to lead a revolution, this woman saw Jesus. And she recognized, she saw him in a way that nobody else at that party saw him. When everybody else wanted something from Jesus, this woman was the only one at this party that wanted something for Jesus. And because of what she did in that moment, because she broke the jar, Jesus said what she's done will never be forgotten. This hidden habit is not about giving money, by the way. In fact, I would say it's almost rarely about giving money. This is about over-the-top acts of love that we do for people every single day. How often is our financial generosity just a way of avoiding actually seeing and caring for people and what they really need? Years ago, I had about $25,000 of student loan debt, and my friend, he told me this years later, my friend was about to write a check to pay it off because he just sold his company for $3.7 million. And he was about to write a check to pay off my student loans, but he said something held him back. And the next couple years, I struggled, and I budgeted, and I figured out how to do it, and I paid off my student loans. And when my friend told me that, I told him, thank you. Thank you for loving me enough not to write me a check so that I had to learn this the correct way, because I would never have learned these lessons. Thank you for seeing what I actually needed. So my question for you is, who has broken the jar for you? Who has done an act of love in your life that you never forgot? That's what breaking the jar means. Do you know their names? I know their names of people in my life that have broken the jar for me. Do you want to do things for people that they never forget? What would it be like to make a memory in someone's life that they looked back on as a time where they actually felt seen and loved and they never forget it? What would a life look like that was lived that way every single day, of making a habit of breaking the jar for people? How do you break the jar? The first way to do it is you listen deeply to people. Become a noticer. Whenever people say something to you, ask, what's the subtext here? What's the cry of the heart underneath? What's the real longing here? There was a guy at a church. I was preaching at a church in college in Topeka. And there was a guy that said, let me take you to lunch afterwards. And he drove me over to this restaurant. And then he took me to the mall. We walked into the mall, and we were in the suit section. And he says, I want you to pick out a suit. And I was like, are you kidding me? And this guy bought me a suit because he said, every preacher needs to have a suit. And he paid and he bought me a suit. He broke the jar for me. To break the jar, you need to be a good watcher. You need to be a good listener. You need to notice what people really care about and what they need, and you need to be ready to act. Jesus only needed this perfume in this one moment. And this woman saw the opportunity and broke the jar. If you're not ready to care for others at a moment's notice, you might miss the opportunity. I love the story. Years ago, the preacher Tony Campolo tells a story about how when he was preaching at a conference in Honolulu, Hawaii, and he could not sleep at night, so he woke up, and he decided he was going to go find some food, and he stumbled into this greasy diner. He said it was so dirty, he didn't even want to touch the menu. And he ordered coffee and a donut, and he's sitting there drinking his coffee and donut, and suddenly in walks about 20 prostitutes, in this little diner in Honolulu in the middle of the night, and he's sitting there, and he notices this conversation going on amongst these women, and one of them, her name is Agnes. She said, it's my birthday today. And all the other ladies just kind of make fun of her and yell at her. And Tony Campolo is touched by this. And so he approaches this big guy behind the counter. His name's Harry. And he says, you know what? I'd like to do something. Do these women come in here every single night? And he says, every night at 3 a.m. on the dot, they show up. And he says, I would like to throw a birthday party for Agnes tomorrow night. And this guy is like touched by this, so he says, I think that's a great idea. So the next night they decorate this entire diner with decorations, and here's what he writes. The woman who did the cooking must have gotten the word out on the street because by 3:15 a.m., every prostitute in Honolulu was in the place. He says it was wall-to-wall prostitutes and me, the preacher. At 3:30 on the dot, the door of the diner swung open, and in came Agnes and her friend. I had everybody ready. After all, I was kind of the MC of the affair. And when they came in, we all screamed, happy birthday. Excuse me. He said, never have I seen a person so flabbergasted, so shocked. Her mouth fell open, her legs buckled, her friend grabbed her arm to steady her, and as she was led to sit on one of the stools at the counter, we all sang happy birthday to her. As we came to the end of our singing, the cake was brought out with the candles, and her eyes moistened, and when the birthday cake came out, she openly cried. As we were about to cut the cake, she said, you know what? Could I take this cake home with me? Nobody has ever made me a birthday cake in my life. And she left the diner, promising to return. And he said, Tony Campolo says there was a shocked silence that filled that diner. And not knowing what else to do, he said, well, what do you say we pray for Agnes? And so he led a prayer with all these prostitutes at 3:30 in the morning. And then when he got done, the owner of the diner said to him, you didn't tell me you were a preacher. What kind of church do you go to? And Tony Campolo says, I go to a church that throws birthday parties for prostitutes at 3:30 in the morning. And the guy said, no, you don't, because if you did, if that church existed, I would go to that church. May you always find ways to break the jar in your life. Hidden habit number 6 is called let Satan speak. Has anyone ever told you to let Satan speak in your life? I bet you've never heard that one before. Let Satan speak. My wife and I were talking the other day about our favorite Pixar movies. One of mine is Up. The first 10 minutes will make you sob like a baby. But it's a story about a guy and a stowaway Boy Scout who end up in the jungle on this great adventure, and there's these dogs that can talk because of the collars, these mechanical collars that let them talk. And the bad dog, the mean dog in the movie is this Doberman Pinscher that's really scary looking. But then when it talks, its voice sounds like it sucked on some helium. and all the other dogs just laugh at this dog. It's so funny, but there's some things in life that it's like they have all this power until you expose them for what they are. They have all this power until you let them speak. Our sixth hidden habit is letting Satan speak. And I don't mean go find an Ouija board or perform a seance or anything like that. That's not what I'm talking about. But letting Satan speak means exposing his lies in your life. Matthew chapter 4, verse 1. Here's what it says. Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. For 40 days and 40 nights he fasted and became very hungry. During the time, that time, the devil came to him and said, if you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become loaves of bread. But Jesus told him, no, the scriptures say people do not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Then the devil took him to the holy city, Jerusalem, to the highest point in the temple, and said, if you are the Son of God, jump off, for the scriptures say he will order his angels to protect you. Jesus responded, the scriptures also say, you must not test the Lord your God. Next, the devil took him to the peak of a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. I will give it all to you, he said, if you'll kneel down and worship me. Get out of here, Satan, Jesus said, for the scriptures say you must worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Then the devil went away, and the angels came and took care of Jesus. If you feel stuck in your life in any kind of behavior, if you feel stuck, a lot of times I think it's because many people have not identified core lies and core negativity things. There's just these negative tapes that keep playing over and over and over. And here's how Satan retains control in our life. Number one, Satan retains control when you limit his role to bad luck. Oh, this thing happened to me, this inconvenience. Satan's trying to keep me back from this. If you limit his role to bad luck, he retains all his power. Number two, he retains his power when we're distracted all the time with digital media. We never uncover the lies we're believing. If any downtime we have, we're swiping on our phones. Number three, he retains all his power when you don't know biblical wisdom. Notice I didn't say biblical knowledge, because Satan knows the Bible better than everyone. What we need is wisdom. I got to a point in my life where I'm like, I don't want to listen to another sermon in my life. What I really need is not knowledge. I need wisdom. Like, who can diagnose the condition of my soul? Who's out there that can give me that wisdom, that can shine that light? And if we're constantly distracted, we're never going to find biblical wisdom. And so how do you let Satan speak? What does that mean? It means you need to pray for wisdom every single day. You need to say, Lord, please help me to see reality as it really is. It means that you have to retreat. Jesus withdrew into the wilderness. Did you notice in that passage I read? He fasted. He withdrew from food. He withdrew from the comforts of the world for 40 days and 40 nights. And it was only when he was hungry that the tempter came to him. And sometimes I think we don't unmask Satan's lies because we never withdraw from anything. We're constantly connected. We're constantly on our devices. And so we're just doomed to replay these negative tapes over and over again in our lives. And so letting Satan speak means naming the lies, those untruths that are underneath all the negativity we struggle with. You know, they say anger is a secondary emotion, and underneath anger is usually fear, frustration, and hurt. I think the same thing is true. Underneath most of the negative thought processes we have are core untruths that we struggle with every single day. So how do I let Satan speak so I can identify his lies? You need to respond to his lies with truth and wisdom. So if the lie is having an affair with this girl I work with would make me much happier, the truth is I actually love my wife and I want to protect my family. And so the wisdom is I need to delete that woman's number from my phone. It's practically applying the truth to your real life. If the lie is a bigger house will make me happy, then the truth is, well, the borrower is a slave to the lender. That's what the Bible says. And the wisdom is, I need to be content and not go into any more debt and be a slave for 20 years. Or the lie could be, I'll be happy if I have more Instagram followers or Facebook likes or friends. The truth is, the Bible says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. It's kind of hard to be obsessed with social media and still do nothing out of selfish ambition and vain conceit. And so the wisdom is, online relationships aren't real. So I need to prioritize real life and limit my social media use. There's an old story from Aesop's Fables about a donkey who found a lion skin and went around scaring all the animals in the forest, but then he came across the wise fox. And he looked at the fox and he growled at the fox. And the fox says, if you want me to think that you're a lion, then you need to disguise your bray. And I think that Satan loses all his power in your life when we withdraw from the things that we cover up our problems with, whether it's food or distraction or social media. And so maybe you need to get away for a couple hours a week, or maybe you need to take one day a month and withdraw. And Satan loses all his power over your life. And so let him speak and respond with God's wisdom. Hidden habit number 7 is called sleep with a stone pillow. Sleep with a stone pillow. That doesn't sound very fun, does it? The other day after the Chiefs won the game, I put on my Chiefs jersey and I drove to Starbucks. I got my Starbucks, I got in the car, I started driving home, and I ran into like 4 different Chiefs fans wearing their Chiefs gear. They were waving at me. They were excited. I pulled up to the stoplight. This guy rolled down his window, and he was waving at me, and I remember just thinking, Kansas City is such great camaraderie in the Chiefs kingdom. This is awesome. And I saw another person as I got close to my house who was wearing their Chiefs gear, and they were waving at me. I'm like, this is such a cool city to live in. Then I pulled in my driveway, and I got out of my car, and I realized that they were not waving at me because the Chiefs won or because I was wearing a Chiefs jersey, but because I had left my Starbucks on top of the car. Have you ever had the experience where something bigger was going on and you were missing it? There's a moment in the life of Jacob, who is the grandson of Abraham, where he had this experience that something bigger was going on. Let me read you the passage, Genesis 28, verse 10. At sundown, Jacob arrived at a good place to set up camp and stop there for the night. Jacob found a stone to rest his head against and lay down to sleep. As he slept, he dreamed of a stairway that reached from earth up into heaven, and he saw the angels of God going up and down the stairway. And at the top of the stairway stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham, the God of your father Isaac. The ground you're lying on belongs to you. I'm giving it to you and your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the sea. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord was in this place, and I was not aware. And then he was afraid, and he said, what an awesome place this is. This is none other than the house of God, the gateway of heaven. And the next morning, Jacob got up early. He took the stone he had rested his head against, and he set it upright as a memorial pillar, and he poured olive oil over it, and he named that place Bethel, which means the house of God. Sleeping with a stone pillow is like saying, surely God was in this place and I was not aware. What a haunting phrase. Is it possible that today, in the normal routines of your life, that something big has been going on that you've missed? The practice of sleeping with a stone pillow is taking 10 minutes before you go to bed at night, or 5 minutes, or 1 minute, and looking back over your day and identifying the ways that God was at work. Christian tradition calls this the prayer of examine. It's just taking inventory of your thoughts and your feelings and your reactions throughout the day to see how God's been at work. Do you want to get to the end of 2024 and completely miss the meaning of all the things that happened to you? Do you want to live the unexamined life? If you don't, then you need to sleep with a stone pillow. I love detective movies where there's like this gruff, sharp, astute police officer that's investigating a crime. And sleeping with a stone pillow every night means becoming a detective and looking back over your day and saying, okay, why did I get mad at that moment? Why did I feel this way in that moment? Or this thing happened to me and I had this thought. It's taking inventory of your day and looking for the ways that God was at work. Here's 2 ways to practice the habit of sleeping with a stone pillow. Number 1, you need to have a place. For Jacob, there was something special about that place, Bethel. God brought him there and revealed himself to him there, and God brought him back later on. In Genesis chapter 35, God appeared to him again at Bethel. God blessed him, saying, your name is Jacob, but you will not be called Jacob any longer. From now on, your name will be Israel. And so God gives him a new identity in that place. It was the place where he heard from God for the first time. He builds a pillar in that place so he'll never forget that that was where God spoke to him. His pillow became a pillar. For Abraham, the place was the oak of Mamre. For Isaac, it was the well outside of Nahor. For Jacob, it was Bethel. For Joshua, it was Gilgal. For Gideon, it was the oak tree at Oprah. For Samuel, it was the tabernacle at Shiloh. For David, it was the cave of Adullam. For Elijah, it was Mount Carmel. For Mordecai, it was the king's gate at the citadel of Susa. For Ezekiel, it was the Kebar River. And for Daniel, it was an upstairs window facing Jerusalem. What is that place for you? Is it a chair? Is it a couch? Is it the hot tub on the back deck? Is it the hot tub at Lifetime Fitness? What is that place for you? Sleeping with a stone pillow means finding your place. It's a chair, it's an office, it's a car at the end of your day to look back over your day and ask God, show me where you were at work. This will change your life. Maybe for you, it's not just taking 10 minutes at the end of your day. Maybe it's taking a whole day at the end of your week, which is what the Jewish and Christian traditions call Sabbath. Taking a day to reflect on your week and ask God, show me the ways that you're at work in my life. Recently, I'm teaching my 2-year-old son how to play hide and seek, and it's so funny because I'll send him in to hide, and he'll go in the other room and he'll find a hiding spot, and then I'll count to 10 and I'll come out, and he cannot wait to be found. So much to where I step in the room and he jumps out of his hiding spot and says, "Here I am." And I tried to explain to him, Tobias, that's not how it works. But you know what's cool about that is sometimes I think God is like that. I think God likes to hide in the happenings of our days, just enough to where we will seek him and take a minute. But I also think God loves to be found. Where if you take just 5 minutes or 1 minute or 30 seconds and say, Lord, where were you at work today? It's like God wants to jump out and say, here I am. So every night before you go to bed, do it tonight. Sleep with a stone pillow. And our last hidden habit for the night is called love like the sun. Love like the sun. In 1968, the Olympic sport of high jumping had been done the same way for hundreds of years. It had been people jumping forwards over the bar. If you've heard this story before, you know what I'm talking about. And then there was a guy that came along that started doing this weird method where he jumped backwards over the high jump bar. And everybody was making fun of him. They were saying that was stupid. And then in the 1968 Olympics, this guy won the gold medal with his new method of jumping backwards. Everybody else was jumping forwards over the bar. This guy jumped backwards. It was called the Fosbury Flop, which changed the sport of high jumping forever. This final hidden habit is something totally new that changed the history of human civilization. It is an insight. It is a teaching that had never been said by anybody else before. And when you go to Israel, I'll never forget when I went to Israel the first time in 2008. And we were there, and we went to the Mount of Beatitudes on the northern side of the Sea of Galilee. And our tour guide said, tourists want to go to all the miracle sites. But true Christians, they want to come right here at the Mount of Beatitudes, because this is where Jesus taught his most famous teaching, the Sermon on the Mount. And it was very popular in Jesus' day to say, hate your enemies. But in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus drops a bomb. Matthew 5:43, you've heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you will be acting as a true child of your Father in heaven, for he gives his sunlight both to the evil and to the good. He sends rain on the just and to the unjust alike. If you love those who love you, what reward is that for you? For even the corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even the pagans do that. When Jesus told that crowd of people on that shore of the Sea of Galilee all those years ago to love your enemies, nobody had ever said that before. This was Jesus' Fosbury Flop that changed humanity forever. But let me talk about the sun for a minute. He said the sunlight shines on the wicked and the good. Let me talk about the sun for a minute. Think about it. The sun is indiscriminate. It gives its sunlight to good people and bad people. Anyone can go outside and experience its warmth on a sunny day. It gives to everyone freely. The sun is also humble. It doesn't demand that we look up at the sun and say, thank you so much for your sunlight. Whether you appreciate it or not, the sun is still going to shine on you every single day. It is the largest object in our solar system. And yet it doesn't demand a worship from everything else. It doesn't demand that we pay homage to it. It just simply keeps on shining. And so from that angle, the sun is practically invisible, which is kind of a paradox because we know it's not invisible, but we can't look at it. If you look directly at the sun, you're going to go blind. So we can only enjoy its gifts indirectly as we see what it shines upon. And even though some people will say, thank you so much for the sun. I'm so grateful that it's a sunny day and it's warm. And some people will curse the sun saying, I just want it to be dark and overcast and I don't care. The sun doesn't care. It just keeps on shining. This is the ultimate hidden habit of the Bible, is to love your enemies every single day. Love people like the sun. Jesus loved everyone indiscriminately, whether it was tax collectors or sinners or religious leaders or disreputable people or fishermen. He loved indiscriminately. Our culture, the dominant principle of our world is reciprocity. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's that episode of The Office where Dwight shows up with a box of bagels. And Andy does not want to be in Dwight's debt. And so he shines Dwight's briefcase. And the whole episode is this war of good deeds. And Andy says, don't you dare test my politeness. And they keep going back and forth. That's reciprocity. But here's the cool thing about the sun. There's no way we could reciprocate the gift of the sun, is there? There's no way we could say thank you to the sun, and yet the sun keeps on shining. Aren't you glad the sun doesn't demand payment or tax from each of us for its sunlight? And so the question is, are you holding on to grudges in your life or bitterness or jealousy? Are you demanding payment from people? Can you imagine what it would be like to be free from resentment, to freely love other people no matter whether they returned it or not? How do you love like the sun? And there's two ways to do it. First of all, you have to open all the curtains. Well, what does that mean? I love staying in hotel rooms, but there's one thing about hotel rooms I hate, and that's that crack of sunlight from the curtains that always seems to fall right across your eyes in the morning, right? And so when you open the curtains, though, you enjoy the warmth of the sunlight, but when it's just that little crack, it's all over your eyes, you need to open the curtains, and what that means is you need to receive the gift of sunlight. You need to be loved before you can go and love other people in this way. Your cup has to be full before you can fill other people's cups. The sun being the center of the solar system, at the center of our world is the sun. At the center of the universe is a God who loves each and every person indiscriminately, more than you could ever imagine. The sun is sometimes amazing when it's on a chilly day and you're in the shade and you step out in the sunlight and you feel that warmth. It's amazing. But the sun is also dangerous. If it shines on you for too long, it'll burn you. And God's love is kind of like that too. It's pleasant, but it's prickly. It soothes, but it stings. It blesses, but it also burns. And so opening all the curtains means opening yourself up to be loved by God. That's the only way you can love like the sun, and you can love your enemies. And the second way is to be humble like the sun and shine no matter what. Every single day, you might even visualize sunbeams shooting out of your body to reach other people. You might think, well, love everybody. I got this, no problem. But you don't got this. Because you have to catch yourself holding grudges, feeling jealous against other people, hating other people. And the next time you catch yourself, feeling that way, feeling vengeful towards somebody or feeling judgy towards somebody, then you need to go outside and realize that you're a receiver of the gift of the sun. And the sun doesn't care. The sun just keeps shining on you no matter what. Good people, bad people, no matter what background you're from. Loving like the sun means loving people that are unlovely. Loving like the sun means loving people that unfollowed you on Instagram, that didn't like your Facebook post, that stabbed you in the back at work, that cut you off in traffic, that stole your parking spot, that cut in line at Walmart, that borrowed $20 and didn't pay you back, that didn't say thank you, somebody who talks too loud during a movie. It's somebody who didn't invite you to their Super Bowl party. It's loving those people no matter what. You know, there is a man who loved like the Son. Indiscriminately, humbly, he loved people no matter where they came from. He loved more than anybody else. He showed compassion towards people. He cared about people more than anybody else ever cared for people. And he even died for people that hated him. May you every single day practice this habit of loving like the Son. Thank you to everybody for coming out to the hidden habits of the Bible.